I used to come down here as a kid from the west part of Los Angeles on a bicycle, and I used to sit on that bridge, and I used to call it the beach because you could look at the back of downtown LA over what was then a train yard. Because 5 years ago, this site was still an abandoned train yard. And what happened, for those of you who are interested in how complex sites get to become something else, is a fairly long and complicated story about the battle between property owners that own these warehouses wanting to use this for more of them, and citizen action groups like the Chinatown citizen action groups wanting open space for their communities. And there was a stalemate. It was a complicated one, but a deal was brokered which gave this land to the state park system. The place that we're on, therefore, became state park property about within the last 10 years. And I had a kind of epiphany that made me feel very motivated to return this site to what it used to be called colloquially, which was the cornfield. And it was called cornfield because we're sitting in part of the watershed of old LA. The LA River, which is just behind us, channelized, would regularly flood, and certainly something that sustained indigenous life grew here. Whether it was corn or something else, we don't know. But the factory at the end of this train line certainly was a place that the trains brought corn into because they made paper there. And some of the seeds probably flew out of the train and got planted in the rich, once upon a time soil here, and for whatever reason it was called the cornfield. So I was able to get the state park to agree to let me remediate the toxic brownfield that was here through a demonstration project which allowed me to grow 32 acres of corn on this site between 2005 and 2006. The project was called Not a Cornfield because of several reasons. One is the state park was determined that we not call it a cornfield because they were trying to shape the word cornfield from signifiers here to call it the State Park of downtown Los Angeles. So the California state, who knows, it's still called a cornfield. It was called a cornfield before. It would probably all be called the cornfield one day. But one of the things it did do is it did make it a cornfield. So the whole argument that it's not a cornfield is gone because it was a cornfield. and so I said, no problem, we'll call it not a cornfield. But the reason is it was also not a cornfield because as an artist I was playing with the relationship between object and name. If it was a cornfield, we wouldn't be sitting in wildflowers 5 years later, 4 years later, still negotiating with the state park about what it means in a recession, in an economic crisis, to be talking about urban parks, and what it means to be talking about public space in a world where we need jobs, we need to redefine every aspect of a sustainable city. So basically, I and my team have just continued to tend to 16 acres and to analyze that tending on a number of levels. Number of animals in the biosphere supported by wildflowers versus 16 acres of turf that needs to be watered, pesticides need to be put on it, herbicides need to be put on it, fungicides need to be put on it for the trees. Where does that water that's been full of all that go? Well, both into atmosphere through evaporation and back into the water table, out back into the channelized river into the sea, right? Not a best practice. Problems are so vast that the only thing to do is do things for me, you know, and I think that all of us sitting in the wildflower share that agenda, is that we're all in a way dedicated to doing something about water. What I and the team that is Farm Lab, or now the Metabolic Studio, is doing is simply doing things. pretty much all the time with an agenda that moves us forward. And what was a natural, contentious relationship between a bureaucratic system like a state park and a kind of oddball, me, coming in with an idea, has turned out to be a fairly good working relationship 4 years later. If we can do it in downtown LA, it's probably pretty doable other places. The hard part is understanding what we're doing in a way that can be applicable to other people, other places, at cost, within means, and to figure out how that all goes. That's the complicated stuff. So we're trying to get better at that, and that's what the Metabolic Studio is. So I thought it was better to kind of bring you out here to the place that this project began, 2005, and for us, at least at the studio, to recognize that we've come a long way in 4 years from a demonstration project using corn to a place where we can get an idea like, let's bring some goats in, and we talk to our colleagues at the state park and they say, fantastic, right? And it happens the next day. Now, that's off the charts in terms of how bureaucracies work, but it has a lot to say to people about what's possible if you don't work with a political time agenda, right? Because we have the luxury of not running for re-election, of not needing to earn money, but we are fueled by ecological time, right? We know that in our lifetimes we want to make a difference.